Wedding planning is supposed to be the fairy tale before the forever. Dress fittings, Pinterest boards, a partner who just dropped to one knee, everything lined up like a cheesy rom-com montage. That was Brittany Zimmermann's life. Just 21, madly in love, and knee-deep in planning her dream wedding in Hawaii. The kind of girl who had her whole life mapped out on color-coded post-its. Career in microbiology, check. Man of her dreams, check. Sunshine and sand vows, double check. Then she walked into her apartment, and never walked back out. What happened next wasn't a tragic accident, it wasn't some random twist of fate, it was a full-blown breakdown of everything we think is supposed to protect us. Law enforcement, emergency response, the so-called system. Brittany Zimmermann was murdered, brutally, in broad daylight, in her own home. And what followed was a textbook case in how to botch justice. The investigation? A masterclass in delay and denial. Leads ignored, evidence mishandled, and promises, so many promises, that vanished like smoke. Imagine losing someone and being told over and over again, "We're working on it." When in reality, no one was working on anything. She wasn't just a victim, she was a warning. Born in Marshfield, Wisconsin, Brittany was a small-town girl with big-time grit, the kind who took AP classes for fun. Graduated high school in 2005, top of her class. Dreamed of becoming a doctor, not because it sounded cool but because it was hard, and she liked hard. She pivoted to medical microbiology and immunology because she didn't just want to help people, she wanted to fight the stuff no one else understood. While her classmates were out partying, Brittany was out baking, meal prepping, planning her next move. She wasn't loud, she wasn't reckless, she was just focused, one of the good ones. And somehow, even that wasn't enough to keep her safe. Scene 1. Type A with a foodie soul. Restaurant hopping, yeah, Brittany was that kind of person. Type A with a foodie soul. You'd think someone juggling a pre-med track, a fiancé, and a wedding in paradise fantasy wouldn't have a second to breathe. But Brittany, she made time. For everything. Even volunteering at the American Cancer Society's Hope Lodge. That's the part no one talks about, the quiet kindness. The stuff that doesn't get posted but builds a person's legacy. She wasn't just well-liked, she was magnetic. The kind of girl that made other people want to do better. Naturally, she caught the eye of someone who'd known her since they were kids. Jordan Gonerang. What started as playground small talk turned into something real, stable, steady. These two didn't just date, they grew together. They were the couple you looked at and thought, okay, maybe forever isn't a scam. Jordan was her anchor, calm to her storm. He followed her to Madison when she got accepted to the University of Wisconsin. They moved into an off-campus apartment downtown. Nothing fancy but filled with plans and future talk. And when he dropped to one knee, it wasn't a surprise, it was inevitable. Brittany said yes and life started sprinting toward the altar. She had it all. A man who adored her, a degree in progress, a wedding in Hawaii on the horizon. She even had a part-time job at the university's registrar's office, where she'd been crushing it for 3 years. Professional, punctual, and, as always, perfect. But that's the thing about perfect lives, they crack the loudest when they break. April 2nd, 2008, it was just another Wednesday. Brittany went to class in the morning, came home around 11:30, probably humming a song or mentally meal planning dinner. Jordan was home for a bit, then left. They even talked on the phone shortly after. Normal, routine, safe. At 12 p.m. she logged onto her laptop, maybe working on assignments, maybe wedding spreadsheets. Whatever it was, she typed for 18 minutes. At 12:19 p.m., everything stopped. A call came into 911, from Brittany's own phone, but no words, just dead air. And in the background, sounds, disturbing ones, like a struggle, like a fight someone wasn't winning. That call should have triggered a race against time. But what it triggered was silence. Muffled screaming, chaos, then silence. The 911 operator stayed on the line, asked a few questions, but when no one answered, she did the unthinkable. She hung up. No officer dispatched, no one sent to check. Just nothing. The assumption? A butt dial, a glitch in the matrix. Turns out it was the final cry of a woman fighting for her life. Meanwhile, Jordan, completely unaware, went about his day. When he got home just before 1 p.m., the vibe was off. The first thing he noticed? The door. The lock was busted. Now, Brittany wasn't paranoid, but she was vigilant. Double checks, triple checks every night. Safety was her routine. So, a broken deadbolt? That wasn't just strange, it was terrifying. Heart pounding, he stepped inside, calling her name. The apartment felt hollow. Then he reached the bedroom, and the world stopped. Brittany, on the floor, lifeless, 21 years old, his fiancé, his forever, now frozen in time next to their bed. Jordan called 911 again, this time the right way. Officers and paramedics finally showed up, but it was already too late. He kept pleading, "She's the nicest person ever. Who would do this?" That's the kind of line that sticks with detectives. It wasn't dramatic, it was real. It was raw. She was alive that morning, smiling, laughing, probably texting him dumb wedding memes, and now she was gone. The room told a story, a violent one. Brittany had fought back, hard, but the attacker won. The lock was shattered. The bedroom was in disarray. But oddly enough, nothing was stolen. No cash missing, no valuables gone. Which made one thing clear, this wasn't about money. Detectives initially thought it might be a robbery gone wrong, but that theory crumbled fast. Who breaks into a college apartment expecting gold bars and Rolexes? Brittany and Jordan were students, not Silicon Valley heirs. For context, Madison had a relatively low crime rate, but there was a growing issue: homeless individuals breaking into homes, usually just to grab food or items to sell. That made investigators wonder, was this just a burglary that escalated way too fast? Or was the break-in just a cover for something much darker? That's when the evidence hunt kicked into overdrive. Fingerprints, footprints, unidentified DNA. The place was a forensic goldmine. But now came the hard part: figuring out whose prints belonged and which ones didn't. They had a lead, but chasing it meant combing through hundreds of transient profiles, tracking people who lived off the grid. No addresses, no IDs, just shadows in a system that barely acknowledges them. But one thing was now certain: Brittany's death wasn't random, and someone knew exactly what they were doing. Scene 1, a little too trusting. Madison, Wisconsin had a reputation. Progressive, compassionate, and in many ways, a little too trusting. The city had something called an unlocked door policy. A quiet, unofficial rule where folks left certain buildings accessible so homeless individuals could find shelter during cold nights. They held food drives, fundraisers, charity walks, you name it. It was a beautiful gesture on paper. But in reality, not everyone coming through those open doors had peaceful intentions. This was the storm Brittany unknowingly walked into. After her murder, people started whispering what no one wanted to say out loud. Maybe it wasn't a robbery. Maybe it was someone she tried to help. As heartbreaking as it was, the assumption was that Brittany was attacked while offering kindness. And that truth hit harder than anything else, because helping someone shouldn't be dangerous. But in a world where trauma and desperation often hide behind friendly faces, it sometimes is. Meanwhile, the Madison County Police Department was doing damage control, but not well. Turns out, Brittany wasn't the first. There had been 3 eerily similar unsolved murders in the area. All young women, all under bizarre circumstances. The public wasn't just mad, they were panicked. Serial killer? Maybe. But what made it worse was the growing sense that the police had no clue what they were doing. Then came the 911 bombshell. The brief call Brittany made before, or possibly during, the attack was now front and center. That phone call, it was her lifeline. And the operator didn't just drop it. She slammed the door shut. Didn't dispatch an officer. Didn't call back. Just disappeared from the moment like it was a customer service line and not a life or death emergency. And guess what? The police station? 2 blocks away. 2, a jog, a snack break, that close. An officer could have walked over and checked. Would have taken 5 minutes max. Instead, Brittany was left to fend for herself in the most terrifying moment of her life. Naturally, the emergency services came under fire. And when the operator finally addressed the situation, she claimed she did call Brittany back, but receipts don't lie. She called the wrong number, and still tried to play it off like she did her job. If she had just admitted the mistake, maybe the public would have been angry but understanding. But to lie about it, that crossed a whole different line. Things kept spiraling. The investigation hit a wall. Sure, they had suspects. Yes, they questioned people, mostly homeless individuals in the area, but nothing was sticking. Leads dried up. Clues went cold. Then came the loss. 4 media outlets, Journal Sentinel, Wisconsin State Journal, WTMJ-TV, and WFSC-TV Madison, banded together and filed legal action. They wanted transparency, they demanded access to that 911 call. The lawsuit dragged out for a year, and the city squirmed the entire time. And still, by 2009, no audio of the call had been released. Just a vague transcript buried in court records. A transcript that barely said anything. Just a description. A ghost of what could have been a critical clue. Meanwhile, the community was left haunted. A young woman murdered in her own home. A city built on compassion, now cracking under the weight of guilt, silence, and unanswered questions. And somewhere out there, her killer walked free. You want to know how this entire case even cracked open in the first place? It wasn't police genius. It wasn't some high-tech CSI breakthrough. It was a scream. Not metaphorically, an actual, audible, muffled scream, captured in a brief, chaotic 911 call that never got answered. That chilling sound was buried in court documents like an afterthought. But for Brittany's family, that scream was the only thing left to hold on to. You want to know how this entire case even cracked open in the first place? It wasn't police genius. It wasn't some high-tech CSI breakthrough. It was a scream. Not metaphorically, an actual, audible, muffled scream, captured in a brief, chaotic 911 call that never got answered. That chilling sound was buried in court documents like an afterthought. But for Brittany's family, that scream was the only thing left to hold on to. By now, a few names had landed squarely on the cops' radar. Thomas Cosgrove, Jeffrey D. Ball, Chauncey Mack, all homeless, all with violent records. The kind of guys you don't want standing outside your front door. Some were known for breaking into homes. Others had been caught wielding weapons like they were props in a low-budget horror flick. So yeah, it looked promising, on paper. But then came the lab work. DNA collected, samples analyzed, and nothing. Not one of these guys could be linked to Brittany's murder. Not by blood, not by hair, not even by accident. Suspicious? Absolutely. Guilty? Apparently not. The case stalled. Again. For months, everything was stuck in neutral. Then out of nowhere, a tip. And this one didn't feel like the others. This one had teeth. The name? David A. Call. And let's just say this man came with a rap sheet that read like a horror anthology. Addict. Serial DUI offender. And he wasn't just violent, he was dangerous. Convicted of assaulting a woman. Known manipulator, one-man chaos machine. Even worse, police had already questioned him 6 times. 6. And every single time they let him walk. And let's just say this man came with a rap sheet that read like a horror anthology. Addict. Serial DUI offender. And he wasn't just violent, he was dangerous. Convicted of assaulting a woman. Known manipulator, one-man chaos machine. Even worse, police had already questioned him 6 times. 6. And every single time they let him walk. Witnesses said they saw him lurking around the neighborhood the same day Brittany was murdered. His excuse? He was going door to door, begging for cash to fix a flat tire. Real folksy stuff. If you didn't know, he planned to use that money to score his next. But here's the thing. Being in the area isn't a crime. Being shady isn't proof. You could chalk it up to bad luck. Wrong guy, wrong block, wrong out. And remember, this was 2008. DNA tech back then wasn't what it is now. It wasn't Snapchat fast or Spotify accurate, it was more like dial-up, slow, clunky, and full of waiting, which meant Brittany's family had to sit in the pain every day for years, and then 2014, 6 years later, a lifetime in grief. But finally, the weight cracked. See, there had been a faint trace of male DNA on the sleeve of Brittany's shirt. Not enough to build a case in 2008. But in 2014, that same smudge became a smoking gun. The DNA match came back, and guess who it belonged to? David. Freaking Call. The guy who had been questioned half a dozen times. The one who kept slipping through the cracks like he was greased in Teflon. David. Freaking Call. After years of false starts, sketchy suspects, and deafening silence, he was the match. A full decade after Brittany's last scream. After years of dead ends and faded leads, there was finally a break in Brittany's case. And ironically, it didn't come while David Call was out on the streets. No, the man was already behind bars, locked up for yet another DUI. Classic. After years of dead ends and faded leads, there was finally a break in Brittany's case. And ironically, it didn't come while David Call was out on the streets. No, the man was already behind bars, locked up for yet another DUI. Classic. But here's where it gets tricky. His DNA wasn't a slam dunk match. It was close, but not close enough to stick a murder charge on him. That partial profile? It was like trying to convict someone with a smudged fingerprint on a foggy window. Without a confession, it wasn't going to hold in court. And David? Not exactly the type to raise his hand and say, "You got." But then, enter stage left Andrew Scholes, a fellow felon. A guy whose rap sheet came with a complimentary orange jumpsuit. He claimed David did confess to killing Brittany, but he wasn't giving up that nugget of truth without a trade. What did he want? Out of prison. That's right, he tried to turn someone's murder into his own get-out-of-jail-free card. Even Brittany's mother Jean went on record begging him to do the right thing, but Andrew, he stayed ice cold. No guilt, no shame, just leverage. This wasn't justice, it was extortion. Cops didn't cave, props to them. They called his bluff, kept him locked up and walked away from the deal. No trade, no freedom, no loophole. Then karma clocked in. Andrew was released on parole in 2015, only to die in a motorcycle crash 2 years later. Whatever secrets he had, buried with him. Meanwhile, David was still out here playing the slowest, sickest version of 20 questions, hinting, dodging, never confessing, never denying, just a human red flag wrapped in vagueness. Investigators were sure he was the guy, but sure isn't enough in court, and time was not on their side. David's release was set for 2021. They were staring down the clock, knowing the man who killed Brittany could walk free if they didn't move. Then finally, it happened, March 20th, 2020, an arrest. And yes, it was him, David Call. The smoking gun, new DNA tech, not partial, not maybe, a full 100% match. No more guessing games, no more cat and mouse. After more than a decade, the monster behind Brittany's murder had a name, a match, and a pair of... David's DNA was on Brittany's clothes. Not a trace, not a whisper. It was everywhere. So the whole "I didn't do it" act, dead on arrival. If he had nothing to do with Brittany's death, then why did his genetic fingerprints paint her entire apartment like a crime scene mural? 12 years after the attack, the truth finally cracked through, and David confessed. Now brace yourself, because what came next was not an apology. It was a horror story wrapped in excuses. According to David, he was just in the neighborhood, going door to door begging for money. At one house the door was unlocked, so he walked right in, found a woman inside. She told him to get lost, and he did. Next stop, Brittany's place. Door locked this time, but David wasn't exactly big on boundaries. He broke in, assuming nobody was home. But Brittany was home, and when they came face to face, nothing happened. Not right away. David said he asked for money. She didn't have any. He was about to leave, then paused to ask if he could use the bathroom. Apparently Brittany said yes. Why? Who knows? Maybe fear, maybe pity, maybe shock. But here's where it flips from awkward to apocalyptic. As David walked out of the bathroom, he saw Brittany on the phone, most likely calling 911. Because what sane person wouldn't, right? A stranger breaks in, you let them use your bathroom, and now your gut is screaming something's... That's when David snapped. He claimed he panicked, said he didn't want to go back to jail. So in that moment of fear for his freedom, he made a choice that ended Brittany's life. He overpowered her. She dropped the phone. Explains why the 911 call cut off. Then he dragged her to the bedroom. He used his hands, he used a knife from her own kitchen, and then he left. Just walked out. Like it was over. But it wasn't over. Here's where it gets worse. Yes, worse. According to David, he left Brittany lying on the bed. But when Jordan found her, she was on the floor, near the bed, which means she might have still been alive, crawling, bleeding, trying to get help, dying in real time, and no one came, because that 911 call, it went unanswered. No dispatch, no patrol, no rescue. Think about that, a woman possibly dying on the floor, trying to survive, while the system that's supposed to protect her didn't even knock on the door. It wasn't just murder, it was a failure on every level. If someone, anyone, had shown up, even minutes later, maybe she'd still be alive. Or maybe, at the very least, her killer would have been caught that night, not a dozen years later. But they didn't. And Brittany's final moments? Silent. Alone. Forgotten by the system meant to save her. It's not just a tragedy, it's an outrage dressed as red tape. When he created the wrong in the first place. When the dust settled, David, 56 years old and decades too late, was handed a life sentence with no shot at parole. He took Brittany's future, and the court made sure he'd never touch his own again. The aftermath? That's where the real gut punch lands. Brittany's family didn't sugarcoat it. Her mother, Jean, didn't speak in riddles or rehearse grief for the camera. She called him what he was, a worthless piece of skin and a killer. And honestly, that still feels generous. Because while David got life in prison, the Zimmermans got life without Brittany. A life with a permanent echo. No graduation cap tossed in the air, no wedding dress, no vows exchanged with Jordan, the man she loved, no white coat ceremony, no tiny feet running around calling her mom. Instead, they visit a headstone. They live with a shadow. But they refused to let Brittany become just another cold case name on a spreadsheet. They turned their grief into something living. Pause for Brittany, a dog walk and fundraiser that pumps life into causes Brittany loved. The money raised helped build the Marshfield area pet shelter, because Brittany didn't just love people, she loved animals with the kind of fierce, nurturing heart you can't fake. And then there's the scholarship, the Brittany Zimmermann Memorial Award. It's given to seniors from Marshfield High who want to study medicine at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, just like Brittany dreamed, just like she never got the chance to do. You've probably heard the feel-good stories about homeless heroes, the ones who return lost wallets or dive into icy rivers to save strangers. This isn't that story. This one ends differently. It ends with a man who chose self-preservation over someone else's life. A man who broke into a home, made a fatal decision, and left a woman dying on the floor while the system fumbled the rescue. Brittany didn't die because of one bad man. She died because everything failed her at once. No excuses, no second chances. Just heartbreak, etched in courtroom silence and the sound of a 911 call that no one followed up on. And that silence still screams.